Hi, I'm James, and in this video I'm taking a look at the updated version of the HTC Camera application for the HTC One M9 smartphone. As you can see here, we have the latest version of the camera installed, and one of the new features is the RAW camera mode. Now, this is actually the reason I tend to not use my phone for photography. I actually tend to carry around a small pocket PowerShot Canon camera because I quite like the RAW functionality that's built in, which is like a digital negative for a photo. So you can see here we have it in the standard mode, and we have our standard controls for various bits and pieces. So we have white balance, ISO, some options for shooting video and all the rest. But now if we swipe over to the left twice, this gives us our RAW camera mode. So this gives us control over white balance, so we can set the colour temperature. We'll leave that on auto. It also gives us some exposure control, so we can over or underexpose the photo to suit. It gives us ISO control, which affects how fast or how reactive the sensor is. So the higher the ISO, the more noise you get in the picture, but the faster the sort of shutter time can be. We have shutter speed control as well, so that gets balanced between the exposure, the ISO, and the exposure time, so you can only adjust some of those elements. Others will have to be balanced against each other. So if we set ISO and exposure time, then you'll see we end up losing the exposure control, and then these factors instead dictate how bright the image is going to be. And we also have a manual focus control as well, so you can change the focus should you want to, say, focus on a specific area of an image. But why this is useful is giving us control over these. Taking a digital negative photo means we can actually fix or adjust a lot of things after we've taken the photo. Also, it takes a much higher quality image. The M9 had been criticised by some people for poor quality photographs, despite having a very large, I believe 20 megapixel sensor in the camera, because they are being over compressed by default by HTC software. Taking the digital negative means you have basically no compression in there, so we can get a much higher quality image as an end result. What we do have to do, however, is move over to the PC so that we can really take advantage of this by using an application such as Lightroom to see the difference between the standard shot and the digital negative shot. Now we've moved over to the PC, and what we have are two sample images which I've taken with the M9. And in each case what it does is it takes a pair of photographs. So we can see here for each photo we have the DNG, the digital negative file, and the JPEG, which is the normal file you'd expect to have. And you can see there is a big difference in file size with these. The digital negatives are both almost 40 megabytes in size per photo, whereas the JPEG files are 3 and 6 megabytes each. So you can see there is a lot of compression from these large images, which are 20 megapixel photographs being compressed down into JPEG. And the effect that has, we can see if we select this. So these photos are the same photograph, it simply saves both as digital negative and JPEG when you take the photo. And if we look at these side by side, we can see here, zooming in on the foliage, how much more detail there is in the digital negative on the left versus the JPEG shot on the right. Unfortunately, some of this may be a little bit lost in the YouTube compression, but hopefully you'll be able to see the difference in there. So in this shot, as we move around, you can see there's more grain in the wood. it's actually sharpened the roof a little bit more, but we get to control that with the digital negative, whereas in JPEG you have to accept what the phone has given you. And you can see that here, looking through the glass at the wood, you've got more texture in the digital negative and different coloration. If we move to develop now, this gives us a lot of options to control what we get from the photograph. So in this right hand pane, you can see we can control things like the contrast, so we can increase the contrast, bring down the highlights here, maybe bring out a little bit in the shadows, in which case we're kind of nullifying the contrast there. But so we can fiddle with this, we can, you know, tune things around, we can go in and say we want to sharpen the image a lot, so we can bring out perhaps the sharpness in the roof, or we can tone it back. So it gives us a lot of control over what we can do with the picture. You can do this to some extent with the JPEG file as well, but what we'll see now is we're going to look at a shot where I've intentionally captured the white balance incorrectly. Now, white balance in a JPEG is kind of encoded into the image. In a negative file though, we can simply say, okay, we want the automatic setting, or we want to say what kind of light we were under, and we can get, whereas before we had some issues with that photo, if we move to the JPEG, we don't have those options to, it doesn't know what the white balance is set to, so it can, so there we've gone with auto, so we can correct things to some extent, but we only have the actual pixel values to play with. We don't have that raw data from the camera sensor. So you can see here, if we do a comparison, auto on the JPEG image versus auto on the digital negative, you can see we're getting much better color recovery in that digital negative file. We also likely will see, now if we look side by side at the books, sorry, showing our before and after, if we go back to the library, compare the two photos, you can see we have a lot more detail in that text. Where it's kind of washed out in the JPEG and hard to read, we've got much more detail stored in that large digital negative file. I hope you found this video useful, and be sure to check out what else we do on our channel and subscribe if you'd like to see more in future. Thanks for watching.